Hello, my name is Michael Ryan and I'm the editor of the award-winning Finance Transformation magazine. Today I'm conducting an interview with one of the contributors and someone who's been in the background team of the magazine since it started 4 years ago. Martin Kirby, would you care to introduce yourself to the readers?
Sure, Michael. So Martin Kirby, experienced head of order to cash, been working in the order to cash, credit management, credit risk field for the last 30 years in various industries.
Okay, very good. I've worked with Martin actually over the course of the last 5 years. I met him for the first time. Where was it? The Tower of London.
It was the Tower of London.
Shared Services Forum event.
Yeah.
Networking event, yes. That was a very good event actually, I remember that. We met for the first time. I'd heard of you, a legend in the order to cash credit management space. And we then subsequently worked together about 4 years ago, just before COVID started. And you managed one of my order to cash teams. And since then, you have been a fantastic help and support to the development not only of the magazine, but also to the consultancy Finance Transformation UK. And Martin here is my go-to guy. When I'm running a finance transformation program and I have a question in the credit order to cash space, I give Martin a call. So Martin, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Tell them all your background, history and experience, what you're a member of. Let them know.
I'm going to challenge you first, I think, Michael, on that legend status, because I'm humbled by that comment really much, but I think I'd rather express myself, or I certainly see myself as a long-time learner in credit management, always trying to look at the most efficient way you can do that with the best products and with the best software and the best people, of course, you know. So it's great. It's humbling to be called a legend, but really I see myself as a long-time learner.
Yeah, well, that's a very good way to look at it. Just give them your background. Tell them all the places you've worked, the type of roles you've held, and indeed some of the senior roles you hold in the associations.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I came out of university. I worked at a local truck rental company, which then got a Hertz badge, and then worked there for 8-9 years in truck rental and truck sales. And there's no better grounding than that in the Midlands, right in the heart of the West Midlands, with a company that was up and coming, and really had to sort of understand how that worked. I can proudly have some firsts as well in that piece. Yeah. I bought the very first fax machine for that organisation, and I bought the very first Excel, which was IBM Excel then, because we didn't have that, and the very first PC terminal for that organisation. And we had to do, it's a good story to tell. I worked with a finance guy, and one of the things that we needed to do was really make sure that we got all the instalment plans for all the vehicles we had on rental. So we had to create this huge Excel to map that forward, so as we never missed any of that. So that's why we had to buy 2 floppy drives, one with the operating system, IBM DOS, and one with the Excel on as well in that organisation. So it's really good. And I think another first as well is we used to have an organisation in those days doing credit reporting called CICM Nottingham. Okay. And I bought, they used to, in those days where you get software today on a PC, or you'd sign up on a PC, in those days they brought you the software on a piece of equipment, and it was a heat printer and a piece of equipment from CCN, where we wanted to check out, even in those early days, companies to make sure that we were trading with the right company. All right, okay, cool. I think moving on from that, I then had my huge opportunity was given to me to go and join Unilever in Port Sunlight on the Wirral. And what a phenomenal opportunity that was as well. And I'm really thankful, even in those early days, for Hayes, the recruitment company, for giving me that opportunity, a big step out. I was definitely going to step into the seat that was occupied by an order to cash legend. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. And I had to sit with him for 3 months in what was a phenomenal place in Port Sunlight. And I then joined their Centre of Excellence, and that's where I stood then for the next 10 years. And it was really, really interesting, because that's where I really first started to understand order to cash process,
Okay.
SAP implementation on a European scale, working with the might of Unilever, working in a building where you could see the managers walked across the top and the people were downstairs, and that was the good old days. But yeah, it was quite really interesting start to what became for me a great career, really, in Unilever, and then really started to open me up to how order to cash really works. Really started to open me up to networking as well, because you know, Unilever's a number of brands. We had 13 brands, and the networking around those brands with other finance directors, really trying to understand how that put together, and then moving all that across to Europe as well was really a great experience. And even just working on part of that team and just realizing how accurate you need to be in that transformation program. And how you really have got to check and double check and make sure there's no mistakes and no holes turned. So really a great part of my time, really.
Okay. And so talk to me about the Chartered Institute of Credit Management. When did you start to become involved?
Oh, so many years ago. I mean, even before Philip King, I mean, actually, Philip and I worked as a credit managers. He was working one organisation, I was working in another organisation. I remember us meeting at a networking event, which was at Headingley at the cricket. But even more before that, I always remember a girl from the Institute, and I don't know if she's around anymore, I haven't spoken to her forever, called Anne Stutz. And Anne used to work in the background of doing all the recruitment, because they used to have their own recruitment arm. Right. So I was a promoter of the Institute of Credit Management really from the early days. And what I really liked about it was a formal way to do a back office process that people thought was easy to do. Right. And I just thought that it was as professional as an accountancy program, and it needed to be that way. And there were some great people, Frank McClintock, there were some great books on it. And it was really insightful reading how to understand the risk of organisations and then start to formally follow that through with an organisation that was doing that. So right from the very outset, I think more or less probably 34 years ago, I've been a member of the Institute, more or less all the way through all the way through my career.
And am I right in saying you're now a fellow?
Yeah, I've been a fellow, I think, for 10 years or more. I think I've got a badge or something that they sent me at home. Yeah, I've been a fellow. I got a fellow while I was working my time with Adecco. And it was a great honour to do that. And I think it's a great thing to have, which sort of, if you like, prescribes what you've done with the Institute, which is following the processes, supporting what they do in everything you do, and also really trying to promote that. And the promotion of that is really important. It's promoting that in the way you speak to new individuals, even members of the team, trying to promote them to join the Institute, to join that all together. So yeah, it was really great to be accomplished as a fellow. Yeah.
And actually, to be honest, it's very impressive. We should actually pay tribute to Sue Chappell and the team at the CICM for their recent awards, which was a fantastic occasion. And thank you very much to SciTrade for the invitation. When did the CICM become dechartered? When did the C arrive?
Ooh, I'd have to check that, but I would think we've been chartered for around the last 10 years. I would say it's been around the last 10 years. And the chartered was a great accolade for the CICM to have a formal polish on what we've been trying to do for many, many years. And well done to Philip and the team for making sure that happened. One of our founders is still on the board, Glenn Bullivant. So Glenn's wrote that credit management handbook 1 and 2. So well done to Glenn. He's a great guy. He's a great character in the business, but he's actually done the work, and he's carried the bags and wore the suitcase, and so well done to Glenn, and as he's been commensurate in the background as well to making sure that we got that chartered status. A number of other players who've been with the Chartered Institute doing the training and the qualifications as well, and I think all that's put together. And I really don't think people understand what value that puts us on us as an organisation, the amount of effort that had to go in to get that chartered status. And I think it's a really tremendous feather in the Institute's cap for doing that, and I think it adds a lot of value to what we do.
Yes, no, I have to say, whenever I'm running finance transformation programs and meeting new clients and so on, and I ask them what associations their team members are members of, those of them that have joined the CICM, they appreciate exactly the cachet associated with saying that you are a chartered institute thereof. So it's actually very impressive and probably unique almost amongst the associations that aren't formal accountancy bodies.
I think you're right. I think others could follow. I'm sure the APA would like to do that in whichever format they decide is the best approach for that. But yeah, quite unique, as you say, chartered for the Institute, and quite unique across the globe as well. Not everyone has managed to get to that standard. Some of the 𝑐𝑵𝑬, there's a few other foreign ones which are very close, but no one really quite as good as that chartered, and that reaches out across the globe.
Yeah, okay. So tell me this then, if I was to have to hire a head of credit, what am I looking for? What are the attributes I'm looking for? So if I'm the finance director and I'm saying there and I really need to get this area boxed off and managed, what am I looking for?
I think for me, if I was involved in any of that process for a head of credit, I'd be looking for someone that is formally and first a great people manager. I think that's really important, really understands the makeup of teams, what makes them tick, how they work. I think I'd also be looking for an individual that is mathematically very good, that can understand the numbers, and it is about the numbers. And I always remember in my early days, know your numbers, and that's all my boss used to tell me at Unilever. As long as you know your numbers, I don't care, just know your numbers. And that numbers is the numbers all the way down to the balance sheet, all the way through to the P&L, right down to the cost, the profit, the write-off, the provision. So definitely someone who needs to know the numbers. I think today as well, head of credit really needs to know more about the overall positioning of the organisation, where that positions within that segment as well. So, where do we play? What's that playing field look like? And how good is that? How good are we? And more importantly than ever, I think heads of credit today need to have great process management skills, really understand processes, really understand what makes processes tick, and really understand how that works. Because inevitably, in order to cash, you're going to want to either have a new tool or some new software or a new process, make things more efficient, make things more lean. Then they're all great tools to have. So those would be the 5 things for me. I think one other thing that heads of credit really need to do as well is be able to negotiate at all levels. So you've got to really be able to step up and talk to that C-suite, maybe talk to the board, and to do that, you've really got to understand what your team's all about, what part they play, and certainly the numbers that they need to achieve and generate.
So I want to bring you back there, because you mentioned something interesting there when you were explaining the start of your career. Excel. Every single time I run a finance transformation program and somebody pulls the business case together, somebody's running around going, we'll get rid of Excel. We'll get rid of the spreadsheets. This system will replace all of that. And I generally tend to sit there going, I pretty much reckon I'll be 100 before an accountant accepts the fact that he can't double check something in Excel.
It's a great comment, isn't it? And it had a name before it was called Excel, by the way. It used to be called Lotus 123.
I wondered what happened to that.
So, and it used to be very similar, / and then you used to different file languages. But it moved, so Microsoft then took the marketplace. Lotus may be still around. I've never touched Lotus in many, many years. There were a couple of other spin-offs as well, but Excel is, if you like, fundamentally, the start of a database in many respects. It's data, it's in an organized fashion, there's 1 million rows, there's 356 columns or whatever it is. And you can put your information on there. Then you can start to do some clever stuff now, programming around that, different formulas, and all the formulas then move on into what we call structured query language or Visual Basic. So if the question is Excel always going to be with us? Yeah, I think is the answer for a while. And it's really interesting to see some of the new tools on the block that have started to work with inside these programs. So let's just use Microsoft's Copilot. I'm not going to get into trouble for talking about that. So Copilot now sits with inside Excel, and we'll remember what you're doing in Excel, and then we'll do that for you next time for free.
Okay, because don't we all forget? Every one of us forgets the formulas.
Yeah.
And you're emailing your mate going, how do I do this with an if sum and all the rest of it?
Yeah, popular statement I hear is, I'm great at pivot tables, but I can't do those if statements. Well, the days are gone, because Copilot would remember all of that for you going forward. So I think it's around for a while as a fundamental tool. It's so simple to use for once you get to grips with it, and now with the added components like Copilot, it's just going to be so much faster. Also, there's lots of links now as well, so you don't have to go and grab the data to bring it in Excel. You can actually reach out now from within Excel to the data. So if you've got a big PDF or you've got a web link, then it's very easy utilizing the new tools to just go and get the data and bring it through, as opposed to copy and paste as we used to do. So question back, yes, Excel's going to be around for a while, I think.
Yes, I have to say, I think I agree with you. That's a very good segue into technology. So you've gone through your entire career. Excel was there at the start. It's still there now. But pretty much the advances in the last 3, 4, 5 years, AI, ChatGTP, I know I never ever pronounce it right. If you're in the credit space, how do these tools help you?
I think it's the most exciting time of my career, is the honest truth for that. I've always tried to follow new tools, new ideas all the way through. But I think for the first time, what you've actually got are tools that allow individuals then to really start to express themselves and really start to work them through. But they are here to stay. They're not, if you look at the investment line that's been processed into this, it's not going anywhere until it starts to make a turn, and it will do that. What do I think? How do I think that's going to work? I think it's quite interesting, and this commentary came up recently, is that I think the new tools will speed up what we do, and speed up what we do in a really good repetitive way, because it remembers, and it doesn't. It's this never forget mentality is the phrase I use. Once you tell it how to do it, it'll just carry on doing it that way.
Okay.
Where we really go forward is where it then becomes technically augmented, so it starts to then ask questions about what it's doing. So we're not quite there yet. We are starting to see that. But I think in credit, certainly in credit risk, the speed of that, the speed of doing credit risk assessments will just be overnight change. You'll be able to just ask that information of a product, and it will give you back the answer, and that answer will be pretty solid. I today use some of those products for doing research. Quite often get people come to me, we've got a credit line, we want to advance this credit line to this organisation. Can you do some research on them? And more in the equity space that starts to happen. But you can use Perplexity Pro, which will then do all that research, and you can actually see where it's getting the information from as well. So you can sanity check that the information is coming back, but it does it in a snap of a time where it would take you hours to do research as well. So I think certainly in credit risk, definitely it will be there faster. We've seen various things over the last few years which have started to speed up some of the input process. Certainly RPA is pretty big as well, and we've seen some phenomenal things. I sat down with a company, Blue Prison. I'm going to say who they are because it's easier to do. And in 2 hours, I wrote an RPA program to order a pizza and pay with my credit card. So, and that again was pretty straightforward. So RPA is around and will carry on to be around, I think, for a while. And again, I think the slickness of that will change because that will just get more automated. Because whilst you may need to know a certain amount of code or a certain amount of intelligence to get that doing, I think really with the invent of chat GPT now today, then that's all in English. So really you're writing the instruction in English. So I think that's where we're going to see that skill. I still think there's a massive amount of need for people because I think people bring precision to that as well. So whilst you can get that information very quickly, it needs to be precision. So speed and precision together to me will always join together. So.
Okay, let me ask you a question then, because we were discussing as part of the AP1 members program with Robert Brooker fraud and all the checks that need to go in across the supply chain. At its very top level, as a man who's been credit manager all his life, where can the order to cash process teach the purchase to pay process to help it combat fraud?
I think one of the big areas is know your customer, and it's one that I've been really strong. And we sort of link know your customer and money laundering together, so AML, KYC as we call it. Knowing your customer is really, really important, and that's something we've been doing in order to cash for many a year. And I refer back to CICM, which was in Nottingham, and that's what we were trying to do, was know the customer, get to the company records, who's the directors, what other companies have they got. So really understanding the customer. And I think for many, many years, that's not been part of that vendor check.
Right.
And I think that's really important today. And I think Robert's right, you know, so much fraud today. We have to be really conscious about that vendor check. And also that payment piece has really started to open that network up a lot. It's very easy to pay. And I think I heard Robert talk around in one of his sessions around two-way match, and we all do two-way match. These are just things that have to be the norm going forward. But I think we've been doing that in credit for a while, not necessarily two-way match because that's a new phenomenon, but we've certainly been looking in credit, how much are they spending, which bank accounts, checking. You know, even in the early days, in my early telco days, we were checking bank accounts, what's the name on the bank account, credit card cover, making sure that we understood the credit card. So even in those early days, we were sort of working out know your customer, have we got the right company, because so much fraud in the early telco days. And we just had to make sure that the people that we're trading with, the people that we're giving those handsets over, were the right people. And so I think APA or purchase to pay could learn a lot from doing more on that vendor master check, that vendor master know your customer. Okay,
all right, cool. Yes, and indeed, as what Martin was referring to was our interview with Robert Brooker, who's a UK national expert in fraud prevention. And we did touch upon that. So everybody focuses on KYC and tearing apart the customer master file, and nobody focuses on tearing apart the vendor master file until somebody says we're implementing SAP, Oracle, or whatever. So that initial thought process and step just doesn't seem to be there as rigorously. So that kind of, if we just extended the conversation then into quality, so where is maybe the Chartered Institute driving quality through credit management processes?
I think the Chartered Institute's really started to pick up a pace on this, and well done to Sue and the team. And they're starting to do these quality webinars where they're starting to do quality training, which they're giving for free. They're getting the experts of the industry to give them their best advice on that. And then there is a whole training program behind the scenes as well, where you can qualify and become a grad member as well behind the scenes. But I really like at the moment the way the Institute stepped up to start to give this free information out, these webinars free, where you can just step up and attend, which is great for you as a manager, because then there's always restrictions on spend and cost. But it's also great for you as an individual, because even if you can't get the time from your organisation, you can probably take time out. It's a great session. They're all very quick and they're giving you really in-depth knowledge. I think also the Institute has been really great, and this will have some sort of crossover with what we've been doing with the magazine. Is they won't, I don't think, ever change. They have that magazine, it's printed, it comes on my doorstep every month, and I sit down and physically read it, and I think that's really, really important to stay with some of those traditional ways of doing that. Especially today where everything's electronic, you spend so many hours, but I think today you skim read so fast. It's sometimes you just need the printed items to print it, read it, tick it. And I think the Institute sticking with that for me is a great thing, and I really applaud Sue for sticking by her guns, or the Institute sticking by the guns, saying no, we're always going to get that magazine.
And to be fair, we should be perfectly honest and say, as we sit here with the coffee table edition of Finance Transformation magazine, to give due respect to the Institute for what it's done in inspiring our own approach to it.
Yeah.
Because I think the fundamental thing, as we've encountered in developing Finance Transformation magazine, and I'm sure the CICM learned long before us, is that senior leaders are time precious. They are busy people. And you want them to be able to have at their fingertips something they can come back to as and when they need to, as a trusted reference point. And I think their magazine, and I think Sean Feast, who leads it, have accomplished that.
Yeah.
And I'm at that stage where if somebody hands me the printed copy, I'm more likely to flick through it. Because I think we're inundated with online emails, newsletters, everything. We're overrun with it.
Yeah. I agree, and I think it's great to have both, is my honest purpose, because there's often snippets. I think I'm probably the expert in grabbing snippets out of articles and reading bits, and I think I really like that, and I'll cut it and paste it, and you can't do that from the physical paper. But even today, you can just take a photograph with your iPhone and do it that way. But yeah, I agree. I think there's nothing better than having that physical piece of paper. Great for if you're travelling on trains and stuff like that. It's a great advertisement anyway for the Institute, but great to sit down and read it and just take some time back.
And that brings us to the article that you wrote for me, that I commissioned you to write, was an interview with Philip King, in which I tasked you to ask Philip what was the future of credit management. And we actually had that article written 2 years ago. And we reposted it onto the website about 3 weeks ago, and Philip came back to me and said, it's all still the same. What I wrote was good enough. It has stood the test of time through COVID and all the rest of it. What's your view on the future of credit management?
I think there's various things, and that's cropped up again this week in the conversation, but I think there are some new technologies that will make credit management different. You know, I spent a lot of time 5 years ago when we talked a lot about blockchain, and I worked a lot with IBM at that time. I'm fortunate to have a family member that was an instrumental lead in blockchain for IBM, so it's been on our coffee table for every week. But I think that technology slowed down a little bit, and I think it has started to speed up again. And I think blockchain, a question got asked this week, what do you think about blockchain, Martin? How will that affect credit management? And I think I answered that fairly, is I think that will eradicate credit management from that specific use case, because the blockchain is a sequence of events across a process that will end up payment in the bank. So that if the payment doesn't arrive in the bank, then that contract won't get fulfilled, I guess. But so I think there are some parts of that, and that's not without its problems either. You know, just the creation of that chain. We don't really have a digital currency, which would make that a lot easier.
Yes, possibly.
We spent a lot of time on digital contracts, which has been great anyway. So I think that would, but I think for me the future of credit management is always going to be around. You know, cash is king, and this is a big thing that we say in the Institute. Cash is king, And it is on every CFO, COO's lips about what's the cash. And in many of the organisations I've worked, certainly in the last 10 years, it's more about that daily cash target. How am I going to get my cash in? And working that through to a daily cash, and how much daily cash do I need, and then working the pace of that flow through, all to make sure that the working capital is obviously correct. But I think we will carry on. I think the things that will speed up within credit management is the digital process, the digital way we engage with customers. I think that's going to be the big change, and start to build the infrastructure around that digital change. Because I don't want to get a letter off a company in the traditional dunning way. I want to be able to just get something on my phone. I may want WhatsApp, whatever that is, whichever is going to be better for me. Which is really interesting about the dunning, because we were talking about that this week. I remember 12 years ago, we introduced the first talking dunning letter.
Okay.
And it really shows you how long it takes for technology to evolve, because you could easily do that today. But I remember doing this dunning letter, this talking dunning letter, which was a statement, and my credit collectors were calling customers, and they would say, I've sent you an email with your statements on, and they'd open the email, and then the letter would talk to them. This is a statement of your account. So I think technology will move on and the digital will start to take that over, I think. And there's various channels of how that digital is going to work a lot faster. Remember as well, we said, how will AI change? AI will remember that as well. So AI will tell you which of your customers will be best to call today and which would be best to call tomorrow.
Right.
And I think some of the things that we don't see, or we haven't seen yet, where AI is absolutely first class at, is in that voice. What is the intention of that voice? It's interesting what Robert was saying, but AI today will tell you what the intention of that voice is, and it will tell you whether it's meaningful, whether or not it's just to get you off the phone, and the intervention of that voice with AI will start to come through. And there's some great things at the moment about video, where you see a lot of podcasts on the telly, or you see a lot of telly interviews. It's interesting to see the AI lens across the top of that, whether or not what they mean, etc. So I think that digital engagement, AI is going to help you speed that up. It will tell you the ones to call, because it will know who to call, and I think that's where we'll start to see credit management change. So a lot more efficient, a lot faster, and a lot more responsibility as well, because the world, if you talk about biz, or you talk any of in the UK, has to be a responsibility of making payments for what you owe on time, and I think you'll start to see that take over a lot.
Right.
Even right down to organisations that outsource to do that collection. It's really important that that lesson really starts to get through to certainly SMEs that really suffer on that, and starting to use that edict, if you like, to really make that pass that responsibility back to the organisations to say, you must pay on time. It's a responsibility. You entered into the contract. It's not good enough not to pay when you said you wouldn't pay. And I think you'll start to see a lot more on that front from credit management over the next couple of years.
Yeah, okay. One of the interesting articles that you wrote as well some time back, which currently sits on the website, is a view from the bridge.
Aye.
So if we looked across the piece at transforming order to cash, what would be your 3 top tips? What should the FD be looking out for?
Okay. The first top tip for me would be to make sure that you really cover all the bases. So right from the start, which if that's the creation of the order, then really understand the basis of that. So make sure that you really understand the full process flow, and really get that insight and get that in capture. I think my second top tip would be really understand the numbers of every single part of that flow.
Yeah.
If it's invoices, how many invoices today? You may need to bring that down to characters. What's the size? How are we going to do that? Are we going to ship that out? So really start to understand the numbers, and just not the financial numbers, which is obviously always important, but the physical transactional numbers, and how you're gonna speed that up.
Yeah.
And I think my third tip is try not to overlean or overlean the situation from the outset. Be respectful of people and process, and do that in a correct manner. You know, don't try and overlean it out initially. You know, these things will need time to trial. These things will need time to trial out, bed in. Yeah, exactly. So don't expect, in essence, you know, put a program in. What do we say? It takes 13 weeks to map it all out, then start to bring that through, and expect to get that delivery in the next 13 weeks. It may need more focus and more time. And I think also really understand as well, when you're doing these processes, where your organisation fits in that, because quite often what you see is organisations try to undertake all this transformational work when they themselves are in an industry that's probably not quite ready for that.
Yeah.
So it's try to position your organisation. Where is that industry? Is it a very traditional industry? Is that traditional industry really ready for that at the moment?
Yeah.
Am I trying to do something that's outside of that, etc.? So I think it's just trying to make sure that you do all that in a correct form. So they'd be my 3 top tips.
Right, okay. So I actually have a question, because I think you touched upon it. I think Philip King was the original Small Business Commissioner, wasn't he?
I think, yeah.
So almost that in essence came out of the whole ethos of the Institute of Credit Management. And we talk an awful lot, I mean, the job that Liz Barkley has to do as Small Business Commissioner and the challenges that go with it. And indeed some of the great work that Terry Kirby is doing in leading his Good Business Pays. From a credit manager's perspective, if you were the credit manager of a small business, is there any key tip you'd be passing on to them to ensure they get paid by the big boys? The teams that we inevitably end up working with, they're the ones holding on to the payments sometimes.
Yeah, I think again it's about understanding the process of that payment. You know, so is it no PO, no pay? So really understand that. So don't send an invoice out without a PO if you expect to be paid. It's just not going to happen in many organisations. Yeah. So really understand what that process means. Don't leave that process unturned. So make sure that, you know, your invoices are going out. Have you checked that they're going out? Make sure the invoices are going out with the correct information on them. Yeah. Because that will just then end up in a protracted dispute management. So really make sure that process is clean, and really underpin all that with really good, effective risk management. Make sure that you've got the right credit limits in place. You've got the right amount of working capital being sold to that organisation. So I think it's really important to get that through. But you've got to get close to the customer, and you can't do it all on your own. You can't expect your credit guy just to do that. It's got to be a joint effort. You know, you may need to involve your account management teams, but there has to be a joint effort to make sure that these organisations pay effectively. Yeah. And generally, the higher up the food chain you go, that's going to be contractually correct. So are you sure you've got the correct contract? I've worked in some organisations where the contracts haven't been renewed, so they're relying on clauses which are 3-4 years old because those contracts haven't been renewed. So making sure that contractual obligation is there from the outset, and then start to discuss that as well.
So one of the interesting things, I've been discussing this a lot with people recently. So if you're in a larger business, what's available to you so that you know who's a small business that you're dealing with when you go back to your master data?
If you're in a large business and you want to know the size of the business, then obviously doing the relevant credit check on that business will give you an idea of where they are on a size basis. That just comes naturally out of that. It'll give you where they are on a credit basis, how much credit that you would extend. There's a number of other data points as well that start to help, that some of the organisations, there's a lot of payment sharing of data. Okay. Where you can actually go and work out how they pay customers. We talked about Terry Kirby, I think, who's done a phenomenal job. You know, I can go on to Terry's website, I can put a customer in, and I can see how that customer is going to pay. Right. And I can see how many days he's going to pay. And it's quite interesting as well, because you often listen to other You can often listen to other people talking about how they're fixing their processes, but actually Terry's data sometimes doesn't support that. And it not only tells you how they're paid, but it tells you whether they're going to be late or how many get rejected. So you can see straight away, just even from that simple information, I've got, you know, if I'm sending an invoice to an organisation where they reject 60% of the invoices, I've got to really make sure that invoice is correct, you know. So I think, so to answer that a bit more succinctly, do your credit check, make sure you understand the size of the organisation and the sort of credit limit you are, and then use these other opportunities to make sure that you'll know whether or not you're going to get paid or not. You know, as I say, Terry is a great wealth of information. A lot of that information floods through the credit reference companies as well. Okay. So you don't have to go into different sources. You can get it from the same source.
Okay, so I think that's a reasonably good tip to give a small business owner, to go look up the Good Business Pays website and see the payment performance of potentially who you're relying upon to pay you. Yeah,
I was with a debt collection company recently, and one of their supervisors said to me, "Why does that matter? Why do I need to go and check how they're going to pay?" And I said, because it matters about how you approach that conversation with the organisation. Because if that says they pay on average 56 days and you're calling them at day 30, then that's a whole different persuasion process to get into. That's a whole different conversation to have. So it really does matter about how you position yourself in that organisation. But great that this is starting to come through. Great, and you know, Anne's often ticking the box for me from Liz Barclay, who I really admire, who followed on from Philip. And some of the stuff that they were doing, you know, so they were actually taking on individual accounts where people wouldn't pay and trying to work that through. And some of the stuff that Terry's done, I think the Terry website's amazing. I think what he's done is amazing, really, really good.
Okay. And indeed, there are articles by Liz Barclay, Small Business Commissioner, articles by Terry Kirby explaining the Good Business Pays process and the awards that are given out. All in the magazine and all on the website, so that you can educate yourself on that. I think my main point from a finance transformation perspective is those of us who run large finance functions and those of us who are responsible for transforming them have a degree of responsibility to ensure that the small business owner doesn't have the sleepless night. And I think we know in depth how those processes can work, what the levers to pull are, how we can improve them, and therefore benefit the cash flow to the approximately 6 million small businesses in the UK?
Yeah.
So I've got one last question for you, because the Europeans do this slightly differently. I think the Germans are an example.
Yeah.
Small business must be paid in 14 days, or it's a services invoice, which is most likely a small business. Yeah. Would it work here?
I think it has to come, doesn't it? I think it's not far away. We're nearly there. And I guess it's important to get there, and we seem to be going up the right way, you know, so we're doing it at the moment, you know, on the utilising the marketing skill of, you know, good business that pays well, and we'll give you an award for it, and I get all that, and that's really good. But I think there has to come legislation. I think legislatively, not far down the way, certain businesses have to pay that style of business within a certain amount of days, 21 days, 14 days, whatever we see fit to do that, and I think that should really drive that. And I think that has to be, we have to move that into a legislative move to start to improve that SME payment performance.
Okay. I think on that note, actually we'll wrap up with reference to the October edition of the magazine from 2023, because I believe you know our cover star.
I do know your cover star really, really well. In as much is Stuart Wood. So Stuart is a great advertisement for any person on how you can do so well. I mean, Stuart's is a Paralympian. He's actually UK's bronze medalist in the last Paralympics.
Right.
And he's actually currently training really hard in Nottingham for the next Paralympics. And there's a bit of a race off between Stuart and Jack coming up. But the whole of the Paralympian organisation, to me, needs a big tick in the box. They do so well, you know, from guys like Stuart, who's come straight out of university. You know, he has no left leg, and some are double amputees as well, but they put all their days, all their efforts, all their hours into a sport that starts to recognise that. So I'm going to take the opportunity to say, support the Paralympians. We're all off to Paris in September for the session. Our fingers are crossed that Stuart qualifies, but in any case, it's always good. And credit to we had a few Paralympians in credit as well. So some people remember Tim Lodge. Tim's still going. He's doing it slightly differently these days. But a big thank you for mentioning that. And all I can say is, if you see it around, sponsor the Paralympians. It's a really great cause.
I think so. Will we be seeing you feature in the 4th birthday edition of the magazine?
I would love to. It'd be an absolute honour again for me to bring some of that learning and write something for the 4th. I'd love to do that for you.
Yep. Martin
Michael,
Kirby, thank you very much.
Cheers.